I think it worked. Yeah, it worked. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting, Wednesday, February 22nd. Today, let me go ahead and pull up the agenda really quick. We actually don't have a demo to start, which is a little uncharacteristic of us, but we do have some great discussion topics. I think it's going to make for a really good community call around, talking about application deployment manager and how we're going to advertise our wasmCloud roadmap, and then kind of have an exciting announcement before we have some free time at the end of the call. So this agenda will be published right after this meeting, along with some notes from this. But I think without further ado, we can get right into discussing. So the first item on our agenda is WADM tidying and productionizing. That's a fun word. And Taylor, you're leading this session, right? Uh-oh. There you go. I just wanted to make sure you could share.
Oh, okay.
Before you had to ask me. Yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Oh, dang it. We didn't get the normal, hey, Liam, I'm missing sharing permissions thing that normally happens. So anyway, so I have a couple things I wanted to talk through. The first one, I hope will be relatively quick, but I wanted to solicit some ideas. So just talking among various like project maintainers and stuff, we wanted to really start using GitHub like projects. So you could actually like track where things are at. We can drag it through. We can show where work is happening. As far as I know, there's two ways to do this. We can try to have like a top level one in the wasmCloud repo that kind of shows where everything's at, or we can have per project ones. There's good arguments for each one because, like, for example, Wash gets a lot of love and is always being worked on, so it could be better to have that as a separate one. But we also could say that like a lot of these things like have interdependencies on each other. So I just wanted to put it out there for the community, like what would be best for everybody to follow along with what's happening. Do you care more about like what's happening in like one or two repos, or do you care like more about the macro level about what's happening everywhere? Because I want to make sure we're addressing the like needs of the community here as we set this up. The answer to question Stephen. So for Stephen just asked the question, why not have the tracking per repo and pull that into the macro level? That is what I mean by macro level. And that's just a lot more effort. Like if I set up a project there and a project there, that's more that I have to go manage about where things show up and whatnot. I personally am leaning towards the per repo thing, especially as the project grows, like we're going to need that anyway. And so that was what it was going for. And Stephen, how about you just come off mute if you can and just describe what you're saying, because I'm not sure what you mean by dashboard.
So, in Jira, how you can, a lot of places I've been, there's been a lot of like goals and things underway at the same time. And when it came to release tracking, what they would end up doing is creating a dashboard, which is just like a visual representation that pulls in information from the other project repositories and just displays it in some kind of formatted way. I don't know if I've never used GitHub projects, but I don't know, maybe there would be a way to use a markdown README or something and pull in information or use GitHub Actions to update some kind of top level README that could display project information at the wasmCloud level. So if someone just wanted a higher level scope of what's going on, they can just open it and see. But then if you're looking at a project, the project's still set up in the repo like you're saying. I don't know if it would be possible, but it's been very helpful when it came to release tracking at other places I've been.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments? So I think that's probably like the next projects plus. I think it's a little bit too much effort like right now. Like I think of it this way, like this is a very selfish way to think about it, but honestly, it's the way I think about it. I can spend 5 hours getting that working, or I can spend 5 hours implementing something in WebAssembly. So for me, I'm going to say I'm going to spend that 5 hours working on WebAssembly and just set up projects. So that's my personal thinking on it. I have not met a ton of people who want to track the whole status of every single open source project under an umbrella before in my past experience, but I mean, I'm willing to do it if there's a lot of people who really want to see that.
So I have a thought. I feel like tracking the whole dashboard of the entire wasmCloud organization is probably most important with a really spread out set of projects where we are, you know, individually working on them, such that like when you come and you want to experiment with wasmCloud, you actually have to care about the status of a bunch of different pieces. You know, from a maintainer perspective, it would be helpful for us to have an idea of what's going on in the whole organization. But from a user of wasmCloud, they probably wouldn't need to take a look at this unless it's regarding a specific feature. Like if you use an open source project, you probably don't go take a look at all the open PRs and issues and things unless you actually have an issue. And for a contributor, most things in our org, when you contribute, are usually in one project. Sometimes you contribute, you know, something to wasmCloud OTP, and then you update the version in Wash or something like that. But I feel like I have to sneeze. But I think that what would be really high impact, like in the short term, is projects per repository, and then people can get a good idea of how their individual thing they might be contributing to is going to progress. That's kind of my gut feeling. I still think it would be useful to have it in some central location, say like, here's all the things going on, especially when a specific feature spans more than one repository, so you can get an idea of what is needed to wrap that up. Rambled a little bit at the end there, but does that kind of line up with what you're thinking, Taylor? I know you said that, like, you know, time spent is really valuable here.
I can see what I do about. I think I'm definitely going to create project level stuff, because that way, if for those of you who are newer to the wasmCloud community, we have a contribution ladder. And so there's, when you become a contributor, you can become a maintainer of a specific project or a couple specific projects, or you can become an org maintainer. Org maintainers are like kind of responsible for running the whole org and everything that's going on at that level. And project maintainers have pretty full control at the project level. And so the project maintainers is like, they're going to want to be able to manage what is going on, like what their milestones are, what their projects are. So I think having that is critical. What I think I can do is start with that and see if I can create like a top level thing that can at least query or pull in all the statuses and stuff. But I haven't, it's been about like, I think 9 months since I last heavily interacted with GitHub projects. So there's bound to be new features that weren't there before. So that's I think probably the easiest way going forward, if that's okay with everyone.
And I think we also have a good bit of, you know, we have like at least 20 repositories in open source wasmCloud org. I think there's some of the effort that we talked about in a previous community call about consolidating some of them. I think we should still do that, but that would make an individual project more and more useful the less repositories that we're actively contributing to, because there are some that we have that are like archived, that are old demos and things that don't need to be pulled in. But the simpler we can make our GitHub organization too, makes this whole process easier, I think.
Okay, sweet. We'll go ahead and just do that. I don't want to take too much time on this. This is kind of community management stuff, but it's good that people know, because everyone's going to be able to do that. So sweet. That was my first thing. Now onto something slightly more exciting. This one, I guess I can share my screen, but I will also share the link so people can see it. That's the one. Okay. Tells me I'm up and ready to go. I'll make sure I have the chat up too, in case anyone needs to give me that. So this RFC is / proposal is something I've put up for WADM, or WADAM as I like to call it. And so it's a pretty long one, and it is mostly in the technical details. The big thing that I want to stress to the community is like essentially that first overview sentence that's on here. like we kind of started with YAML and then kind of let it sit to do a lot of stabilization and some feature stuff inside of the host. And so it's always been kind of at like a rough alpha level of support. It's been there, you can try it out. But there's like a lot of things that have even changed. Like, for example, it requires 2 databases under the hood because NATS didn't even have KV stuff built in when we started. So that is all, that's all kind of like accounted for in here. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is talk about, okay, what's the work that we need to do to to get it done and out. And so that's what this RFC is. It goes over just like it's typical like proposal stuff. What are the goals? What are the non-goals? What are the different key technical decisions? These are like the different things, like different architecture designs, why things were argued for, how we're going to support things like custom schedulers. And then at the very bottom, which is probably more important to people, is the like basic roadmap of what it's going to be. I didn't want this to be prescriptive and say like, this is how everything should be done. So I tried to keep it as higher level, like this kind of work needs to get done. And it's going to be split up into, as we finish this over the next, hopefully month or two, is what I'm hoping for. We'll see how it goes. We want to finish, there's like some stage 1 stuff. And then stage 2 is a lot of spiking things to see how this is going to like actually work. Cause there's some, it's one of those things that's easier to tell when you're implementing if it's like what kind of method is going to be good or not. So that's more spiky. And then the whole goal, if you don't notice here, is like, hey, I want to be able to have E2E things. I need functional deploy pipelines that deploy it as like crate, plain binary, Docker container, the full shebang, so you can run it anywhere you want. And then also making sure that it's built into Wash. All documentation is there, and then deploy guides are in place. So anyway, this is not dictatorial. This is hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. I've done some thinking about it. Here's the ideas. And so I invite anyone who's interested in the technical details to go comment on it and look through that. I have some example work of like what I was trying to do. There's a link there. I think this will be done as a feature branch that's separate from the main branch, so we don't break anything that anyone that's currently using it. And then we'll push towards a new thing. A couple key points that I wanted to point out here with with some of this, like we are trying these last 2 sections are important details. We are building in, not implementing right now, but we want to make sure we have support for custom schedulers that you can just extend it on your own. But we also want to, the thing that I'm trying to push for here is that we create something that could be used as an example, but as also the canonical scheduler. So most people will just use WDAM by themselves, just plain, like it'll work for the general use cases. But you want to build like a custom scheduler. I was trying to learn from the experiences I've had with Kubernetes and working with Nomad and stuff, that like the problem you have with tools such as Kubernetes right now is you're kind of like stuck using their scheduler. There's extension points, but you have to do it there. You can't like just roll your own scheduler or do anything. This leaves that open if you have an advanced use case and leave some of the building blocks around. One of the questions Steven asks is logging, tracing one of the stages. That's built in everything, in my opinion. Like that's not a separate thing. I already actually have logging and tracing in there in the stuff that I've started to build. Like, so if I click on that and show you, we have, like if I go through to like, so there's some like leader election stuff I wrote, we can see specific stuff that happens. There's instrumentation for each of the levels. There's like, I'm tracing when things are starting, like all of that is just part of the, like, that's table stakes for me. When you're writing code, and when I'm reviewing this code, that's if you're someone who's going to want to contribute, I will be looking for like, hey, are you logging? Are you tracing some stuff? We want to basically just bring this to production level quality. It's still going to be a pre 1.0 thing because we're iterating, we're doing that, but it's going to be production level quality is the goal at the end here. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. I tried to give every single like reasoning behind what I'm trying to like push for and build. I don't want to be the only one doing this. But I was trying to lay down a lot of the scaffolding so that people could build stuff on top without too much overlap and or rebasing. So anyway, this is new. I just put it this morning. I had it mostly done yesterday, but I was just trying to do one more grammatical pass and just checking everything else. So I just pushed it up about 30 minutes ago. So yeah, that's all I have. Like I said, there's not much, there's not really a demo here, but I just wanted to let people know we've been thinking about it, and this is the RFC to try to get us over the line. Any questions? I'm glad you're excited, Stephen. Stephen just said that in the chat. He's excited. I will note, like, the behavior should stay roughly the same. It's just, this is more like underlying technical details rather than like changing the whole, like, ideally. So if you actually look at how like WebAssembly works, you have the OAM stuff, like there's no change to that. Ideally, this should work pretty much as is. I mean, I always ascribe to the philosophy of prescribed philosophy of never say never, but like ideally this shouldn't change. You'll use the exact same thing as you were using before. Just some of the deployment mechanisms and how we get it running and including it with Wash and all that kind of stuff is going to be like part of the main thing. Okay, CJ had a question about what would you say is the biggest gap between like current and target state. A lot of it is around, there's not a lot of testing, like as it currently stands. There's not a lot of testing. There's not a lot of, we just have some basic examples. We have it, like, there's no way to easily deploy it. Like, yes, there is. Like, if you know what you're doing, you can deploy it, but there's not like an easy, like, I can just do this with Wash, or I have a lattice that I've already set up. How do I add this in? You also have to like have Redis, and like we're trying to make it so there's not anything in Redis at this point. Nats is where we're going to store that data since we already have it. So there's a lot of those things. Also, in here is the decision, like we needed to have people, this is a critical component for so like if we look at the goals here, like this is something that is mostly there at the top level. We're working there, and like this is there, like that's the idea of WebAssembly in general. But we don't have anything that shows us how we can operate it. We're not basically acting as a canonical scheduling implementation. We are by like de facto, but we aren't actually implementing as such. This one is like, we need to be a project people want to contribute to. So for this is why down here, one of the things, the proposition here is that we rewrite WebAssembly and Rust. And I go into extensive detail because that is a change from what we have. About the justifications why and why it matters. And it is in order of importance in these sections. And the biggest is the need for contributors. And I mean, I gave the TLDR right there. But essentially, we need, like with something this critical in an ecosystem, we need people to be contributing to it. And we need people who can go and understand what's going on, contribute with a language that that they're a little bit more familiar with, and adds a couple other benefits that are talked about underneath. But contributors are the main thing there. And so like that's one of the big gaps to answer your question, CJ, that I was trying to address with that decision, is we need the ability for people to more easily contribute to stuff. And I can go over that some other time, but you can look at the metrics across repos and you can see where contributions are happening inside of like the different wasmCloud repos, and kind of get a feel for why it's important we have it in something that people are going to come contribute to. So that's one of the big things, is we have to have that, because if it's just me doing it, like, yeah, I've written schedulers before for Kubernetes. I've worked on Kubernetes, and that makes me a decent expert, but that doesn't make me the end all be all of this. There's people who literally study this for a living. So like, I want to make it as easy as possible to like contribute in. And so, yeah, I talk about all the different things inside of here, advantages, disadvantages. For Jordan, I specifically explained why we didn't choose Go, even though that was a frontline competitor. So this is where I wish Jordan could camera most of the time, because I really want to see his laughter at this point. But anyway, so anyway, this gives us a whole list of points to talk about. So those are the gaps we're trying to solve. There is just really the productionizing of it and being able to support it long term with a group of maintainers that can grow. So good question. Any other questions? Yes, Stephen has a question. I'll just read it back for those on live stream. Are there plans or discussion around bringing Terraform or similar into the equation after WebAssembly is in a good spot, namely for the addition of hosts into a NAS cluster via some Terraform provider? So that's kind of an overlapping question. So one of those is actually about spinning up hosts, and one is about spinning up WebAssembly. They can run separate, and by design, we actually have it so that you do not have to run WebAssembly. We figure most people will, and I'm pretty sure when we get to implementing it, we'll debate it for certain, but I'm pretty sure by default, when you run wash up, it's going to start WebAssembly for you. But you are not required to use it. You're not required to do any of those kind of things with it. So Terraform for this kind of stuff, those are the kinds of things we are planning on improving on the documentation side of wasmCloud itself. The actual host, we want to be able to have different ways you can deploy like multiple hosts across like whatever you want to. Basically, those deployment guides are kind of a little bit of a weak spot. We know that, and we're going to be working on adding that for people who are more infra focused. And those would definitely have things like Terraform, or we're also completely welcome to having someone contribute Terraform that they've written. And then WADM is just an additional like add-on process. It's essentially a sidecar. For those who are familiar with the Kubernetes space, like you can run it and you can run multiple of them. You can run one of them. It doesn't really matter. Then we have another question from Oren about is supervision tree a major concept in the scheduler? I actually kept it as simple as possible for what we're doing. The idea is we can iterate into it. I went back and forth. I wrote state machines in Rust for Kubernetes in the Crater project. I specifically called it out for those who are rabbit holey like many of us engineers and want to go take a look at that detail. But the idea is that I linked it right here. That's Crater. And the whole idea is that I'm trying to, this is super, I'm going to try to stay too much out of the weeds because we could get real into the weeds here. Basically, I want to make them commutative so that it doesn't matter which order you run through. So basically, you can give it an event or like a manifest, and it passes through any arbitrarily long list of these scalars, the things that can make decisions. And then no matter which order you run it through, it ends up with the same result in the end. So it's just more like making like, hey, what decisions need to be made down the tree? And that's why I said like I need to actually go through the hackery of trying to implement this to just see some of the like nuances of it. And so Jordan asked a question. This is one we talked about before. So why aren't we talking about implementing WebAssembly as an actor? And so we can hold state and talking about holding state and providers. So the main thing is chicken and egg. We debated this extensively beforehand, and there is you end up with a who watches the watchers kind of situation. We could get around this by adding something into that's like the equivalent of, I'm trying to remember what they're called. I can't remember if they're called bootstrap manifests in Kubernetes, but basically something that all like is loaded from disk. Anytime like the kubelet started and it would start those pods, we could implement something similar for WebAssembly. But the thing was I wanted to make this when we were talking about it as well, and I kind of revisited that as I thought I didn't address it in here, but as I went through the thinking on it, I want to create something robust and do it now and not have to worry about, like thing to thing inside the actor, and then worrying about which thing is supervising that and where that state is stored. Like I actually really want to do that personally, but I wanted to start from somewhere that we could then do that in the future. Like I'm not saying none of this is saying there's very few things in this RFC that are like thou shalt not, like we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. It's more like not right now. And so to keep it just as simple as possible and avoid the whole chicken and egg bootstrap problem, like we're just going to have it be a separate process. That doesn't, and like I said, down in this section that I kind of pointed out, the idea is that like the key functionality is reusable. I mean, that'll start out as a REST crate, but we can generate bindings to any language we want to from there and have it so like you could write and do these things. So like we could technically take this REST stuff and use it as building blocks into the actual actors and providers in the future. But it was just more, I was just trying to follow the KISS principle here, just to keep it there. But yeah, we went back and forth. I'm still game, like if we can talk about it, but yeah, the bootstrap problem, and then like some of the like the state maintenance stuff was it and yeah, ultimately, like now that I'm thinking back on it again, ultimately what it comes down for me is the whole like who watches the watchers. Like this is the thing that's supposed to be scheduling. This is supposed to be scheduling out things like in the thing that it's being managed by. So it's just trying to avoid those. Kevin will get to you in just a second. Jonathan had a question in chat. What about the supervisors that come for free from Erlang or Elixir? This isn't supervision. This is totally event driven. So essentially what happens is when it gets an event from wasmbus.ebt, it says, well, like what was it? Was it an actor stop? Was it a host stop? That can trigger different kinds of actions. It's not like watching a process to be alive. It's more about saying like, okay, did my state change? I'm going to do something now. Did my state change? I'm going to do something now. I mean, you can code it up. I'm not saying you can't code it up in that. And then you can look in the language section for other reasons why specific things were chosen. So there's that. Kevin?
Yeah, so along the lines of the KISS principle, and maybe this is just because I haven't looked into it in that much detail since you said your branch isn't that old. When you mentioned that the branch has leader election, part of my distributed system brain treats that as a warning. Like, why are we re-implementing leader election? Because implementing leader election is generally something that most people do wrong. So I'm just trying to figure out what functionality in the branch requires our own custom leader election.
So that's this section right here. We need the ability to be able to run multiple copies just in a high availability scenario. The simplest thing is with leader election, because then you just have one process running. There's no state coordination or anything like that.
Well, yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts there. One is that leader election is never simple. The other is that currently the WATM application does run as a cluster with only one leader for each given observed lattice. So in today's code base, we essentially get leader election for free from OTP. And OTP has like 20 years of refining the leader election. So what I'm worried about is us hand implementing our own leader election. Are we sitting on top of somebody else's library for leader election, or
we're sitting on top of NATS?
Yeah, but NATS doesn't have client leader election.
Yeah, no, it does have client leader election, but it does have the same basis for other things, like it's basically the same pattern you do in console. And there's another one I was looking at, but yeah, you can look at the code here if you want to.
Yeah, it's a thing that we have to implement new in this rewrite that we didn't have to implement before. So I was just curious where the need came from.
Just the need to have the leader election. That's all it was. It's just so that you could have the multiple process thing.
Yeah, well, I guess what where I'm going with it is that I'm trying to figure out where the need for leader election actually came from, because you can have 1,000 copies of something running and not actually have to pick a leader, and it'll still do what you need it to do. Like you could accomplish the same thing with NATS queue subscriptions and have it only deliver message to one of the things in the queue. Anyway, I don't want to rabbit hole on this. I was just trying to figure out where, what part of WATM made us decide in our RFC that we needed leader election.
It was just all about having high availability. I thought about queue subscriptions, but maybe I misunderstood something about queue subscriptions and how they were going to work for us. And I'm fine just going to queue subscriptions if that's easier. The main thing was around the fact that like anything can observe. In fact, that was my plan, is that like it'll always be observing and having like basically the like what's the current state of the lattice available in it, but like what's allowed to perform actions, what's allowed to essentially send the control thing like start actor, or start provider. Those things need to be locked so one thing does it. Otherwise, you're going to have like 20 different things try to start it. And for start provider, that doesn't matter, but for start an actor, that'll bump up the actor count for every single one of the WDAM processes that's running.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
You know, like you said, leader election is one way to do it. I think there's still a way to do what you're talking about, where you have high availability and only one thing actually issuing control commands to a lattice without having to pick a leader.
Yeah, and I'm all open for that. So sounds like a good one we should probably discuss in the proposal. Because if there's a good idea here, I'd love to do that instead of doing this. I mean, I did implement and test everything here just to be sure, but that doesn't mean I didn't do it bug free, because I always write bugs. So yeah, if there's an idea of how you want to do it here, like please let me know, because I'd love to swap that out to be something different if we want to.
I just wanted to say that I actually had a really similar question, and I think that was a good kind of bow to tie on the leader election present, whatever. But I had a similar question about it, so I'd love it. I think you said it, but just to reiterate, let's talk about it in the issue, because I want to be able to read some of the rationale behind, you know, whether we like where we exactly need to elect a leader, ways that we can do this in a good distributed systems way. All that stuff is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm
yeah.
totally game for that. Like that's why this is up here. And that one was just one of the ones of like, hey, like I just want to be able to have a leader elected easy. Like I don't want to have to, like, that's always going for. And so if we can do that with another construct, I'm down for it. Okay. Figured there'd be lots of good discussion there, but we still have time left. So I will stop sharing and hand back to you, Brooks.
All right. Well, the last thing that I wanted to bring up in today's meeting, and normally I do, I try to keep, I work at Cosmonic and try to keep this meeting like kind of all focused on the community. But I did want to bring up one thing that we launched yesterday, which is really exciting. Cosmonic is actually sponsoring a hackathon for distributed WebAssembly applications. And this, I'll go ahead and ping the link in chat, but you can actually find it. It's like one of the first hackathons, or it's in like the first page of hackathons on DevPost. But one of the reasons why we wanted to do this is to really outline a hackathon experience for somebody looking to build something using wasmCloud, and then essentially just take that and host it on the Cosmonic platform. So the reason why I wanted to publish that and talk about it here is that anybody in the wasmCloud community, if you are building a project using wasmCloud, if you're creating an application and it's doing something really interesting, something that is or even just really fun, we'd love it if you took that and submitted it to this hackathon. Really, the only requirement is that you have a wasmCloud application and you deploy it on the Cosmonic platform. So this is open to everyone, including outside of the US. It's going to be running for the next, I think, 8 weeks or so. So you have a good amount of time to get your ideas together and get something implemented. But nothing gets people motivated to build a little something than a little dollar amount attached next to it. So we have a few prizes for the people who, had the most interesting project, who, honorable mentions and things like that. So I just wanted to publish this here. Would love it if you've been thinking about building something and just haven't quite gotten to it yet. This would be a great thing to submit to. And yeah, so just wanted to announce that we've been working on putting that together for a little bit. Super excited to see what everybody comes up with if you get to submitting to the hackathon. Unless there are any questions on that piece, I think this is the end of our kind of regularly scheduled agenda. let's go ahead and we can start the free time part of the community meeting. Anybody have any high level questions about or things they want to discuss about wasmCloud?
I wouldn't mind asking some WADM questions.
Oh yeah, sure.
Is there a way to see like any logging currently? In the terminal right now, I just get like connecting to host and port and that kind of stuff. But then when I investigate like the wash dashboard, I see like links have been added and actors and providers haven't been. And if I try to list the app, I get like a radix connection error reason closed. So I don't really know what that kind of stuff means right now.
Okay. There should be logs coming out of WADM. It's
To
possible
where, because I couldn't find any.
the standard out of what I was getting at is it's possible that the log level might just be set at something like info. Are you seeing any debug logs?
No, I think it's just set to info. So I'll just do that through Wash, I guess. The Wash tool, just set it to debug.
Yeah, here I'll send you, because Stephen, I know you're in the Slack. I'll send you something that you can set the logs for WADM. It sounds like you might need to, because WADM does depend on Redis as well. So might
Oh
need
yeah,
to start Redis.
every time you save my bacon. I didn't have Redis running. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. Like that was one of those things that we're like, when we created this, there was no like way to store this like in a KV store like Nats had, so it was like, well, Redis it is. And now we're like, no, we don't need that anymore. So like the goal is to just be like, no, we're just using Nats. You'll use the same stuff you're using for your like Lattice. So should be pretty easy.
Do you have any more questions there, Stephen, on
No, I'm just kind of
WADM?
kicking myself because I feel like I hit this issue before and it was the exact same issue. Like I'm thinking back and I'm pretty sure I've hit this issue before. So it's like, oh gosh, I got to write this down somewhere.
It's a good call out though, to make sure that we're being intentional about the readmes and how to run it. Make sure there's
But there
enough
was a plan
information.
to remove Redis eventually from WADM, right?
Yeah, exactly what Taylor's essentially talking about there. At the
With the
time,
key
there
value
wasn't
net.
really Nat's key value when we first wrote it, and now there is, and that would be great. But we just wanted to get something prototyping and working, which kind of the easiest way to do that was just to reuse a Redis connection that you're probably already running for like wasmCloud stuff. Kevin, did you want to add a little more detail, because you were there when the book was written?
Yeah, I was there back before the war. Just the context I wanted to add is that ever since Nats switched from the product they called Stan to the new product called Jetstream, we've always been kind of sitting around saying, yeah, we should probably modify WADM so it uses Nat streams instead of Redis. And priorities and time being what they were, we just never got around to it. And so, in Taylor's proposal, it's just kind of putting in concrete terms that we've always wanted to switch from Redis to Nats. We just haven't in the current product.
You mind if I ask
Stephen?
another question? Yeah, cool.
No, go for it.
So what I've been really curious about is the Vault and WADM integration, because right now something I'm doing is pulling configuration from like a Vault provider through a Vault provider, but WADM has KV Vault integration. So like, would it be reasonable to just remove the KV server that I'm running? Like, does WADM start up like some kind of Vault server instance that you can access and then use that for all secrets in your Lattice or cluster? Like, how should you be managing Vault in that scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few pieces there. There's the actual vault server, like HashiCorp Vault, that's actually storing your secrets and everything. And then we have Wadum that interacts with a vault server to pull credentials to connect to a lattice. And then we also have the key value vault implementation, like the capability provider for wasmCloud. So when you say you're pulling credentials from Vault, you're talking about like an actor is talking to a vault provider that pulls from a vault server.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm wondering if you can just like avoid that by having like some kind of WADM global secrets that you can pull from.
Yeah, that's
Kind of
an
like in
interesting.
Kubernetes, where it's like you have these um, secrets available to your certain namespaces that you can grab.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts there, but Kevin beat me on the hand. Um, Kevin, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, if I understand the question right, I think that that providing secrets to everything within a lattice is a separate set of functionality than from what WADM does. So WADM is basically an observer and reconciler robot. It
Okay.
watches the lattice and makes changes to the lattice, and it may need secrets to do that job, but its job isn't to provide secrets to the rest of the lattice.
Okay.
If you want to give an actor access to secrets, like Brooke said, you can give it you can hook it up to a key value provider that is backed by Vault. There's also a configuration service that we have where you could write an actor or something else that responds to configuration service requests that might read from a vault. But yeah, I think the key idea is that WADM's core responsibility doesn't include providing secrets to a lattice.
Okay, cool. It's working pretty good the way it's set up now. I just was worried that once I start using WADM more, like there would be some kind of conflict or I would be wasting some kind of resources. I didn't really know, but that makes sense. Thank you.
I think Kevin said it a lot better than I was going to say. But I was just going to talk about the same thing, like the separation of, what is actually a vault server and all that. But that's a great, that'd be a great topic to bring up in a future community call. If we can get some RFC or thoughts around it, may spin off on a Slack thread after this call, just like a broader, I have a secret, I want it available to the whole lattice. How can we do that in a secure way, or maybe available to a subset of things in a lattice? It's pretty interesting. Cool. Well, Stephen, if you have any other WADM questions, we're happy to go through that. But I just want to open up the open floor to an even bigger open floor. If there are any questions for the WebAssembly community as a whole, stuff going on in WASM, now is a great time we can chat about that. So this is essentially totally free time if anybody has something on their mind.
I can ask about actor to actor stuff if you
I saw you coming off mute and waiting for it. If you have a question, then yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So with actor to actor communication, like is there anything specific you have to do in WADM? Like there's no link definitions you define. So just wondering if there's anything there that needs to be of concern. Like are you just using an interface? You don't have to declare it anywhere. So except in the actor code.
Yep, WADM neither facilitates nor blocks actor to actor communication. That stuff works regardless of whether you're using WADM or not.
Oh, that reminds me, like with the messaging provider, I noticed that there was message subscriber or something like that. which it was kind of like geared towards actor to actor calls, but there was only a handle method. So I was curious about that because like when you implement your own interface, you end up getting like the sender. So was there was there a goal to have the messaging provider be able to do actor to actor communication?
No.
Or okay.
So the messaging provider is definitely not for actor to actor communication. You to do actor to actor calls, you don't need a provider.
Yeah, I set provider to false. I just I was curious because they had like when you look in the code, you see an actor to actor section.
Yeah. So the way that I'm trying to figure out which question I'm answering. In general, the way you do actor to actor stuff is you create a contract and you set it to actor handle is true. And so then you define your actor and you implement the handle function for that. And then you in the actor that's making the call, you create an instance of the sender for that contract. And then the target is specified. I forget the exact function name, but at least in Rust, it's something like with actor or to actor, something like that. And so
I think there's to and from.
From, I don't think we do, but when you create the sender, instead of doing, my contract sender new, you would do my contract sender like
to actor.
I forget the exact function name, but that's generally how that works. And so when you tell the wasmCloud host that you're going to communicate with using this particular contract and targeting this particular actor, it doesn't go through a provider. It just immediately converts that into an RPC call. And the target is pseudo-randomly chosen among all of the instances of that actor that are running in the lattice.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's why I set up like a call alias, because I was confused as to like how you would know to send it to the right thing without a call alias.
Yeah, so if your public key is one that you can rely on being the same all the time, then you can just use the public key as the target. But more often than not, what people end up doing is they have different signing keys for dev and prod or for their workstation and production. So in that scenario, the public key changes. So there, what you would end up doing is when you create that instance of the sender, instead of supplying the public key, you would supply the alias, and the host automatically takes care of converting the alias into the public key based on the claims that are cached in the lattice.
And you only have to declare that in the wasmCloud.toml, and it's like that seemed nice, unless I'm missing something. At least for the call alias, that's something that confused me about Wadum, is if you have to declare an alias anywhere there. But
Wadum doesn't do aliases either. It really doesn't care.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, cool.
And in the chat, there was a question that Brooks already answered about disabling actor calls. And so by default, we allow them all the time. But if you set up a policy server, that policy server can reject specific actor to actor calls. So the policy server will be told this actor would like to talk to this other actor, and you can choose to reject or allow that call.
Cool.
Yeah, we had some good discussions around allowing actor to actor calls by default. Actually, I think that it might even be an ADR that we formalized on allowing them by default. We could certainly, I'm going to try to dig that up while I talk. We could certainly think about like a flag to disable them entirely. but hey, I found it. Here we go. Could certainly think about making it so that you have control over whether it's beat you by a millisecond, allowed by default or denied by default. I think a core tenet of this was that if you have an actor trying to call another actor, it's really hard to misuse capabilities in this way when you design your actors to be a little more single responsibility, because you can never really tell an actor to do something that it's not supposed to with the capabilities model. And of course, speaking in absolutes there is probably a bad way to approach it, but the flexibility of not linking two actors together really kind of outweighs the benefit of denying it by default. John, let me send you an example of a policy service. There's an actor in the open source repository that's just a single actor that implements a policy that you can only start WebAssembly modules or providers that are signed by wasmCloud. So and sorry if we didn't read that question, but John actually asked if there were any examples for this type of policy service, and we have one in the open source wasmCloud examples repo under actor and then policy. So this is just something that the wasmCloud host will send out an ads message to and say, hey, am I allowed to do this thing? And this just lets you put on more security. You could prevent actors or providers from being started. You can prevent invocations from going through, things like that. And it's a generic thing. So you could implement it for a variety of different backends.
I guess I want to ask about this policy actor. I guess it seems a little surprising that it's like a process as opposed to just some configuration, I guess. But maybe you already answered that, but I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that.
Kevin raised his hand. I'll let him do it. He followed the rules of the classroom.
No, you in first, so go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, like, the reason is, like, everything we tried to do with wasmCloud is we don't want to like box people into specific solutions or config things. So we don't want to say like this is the way we do it, and like you have to know our syntax and our way to approve policies and our way to do that with config. We want to make it as flexible as possible, because like we've been clear, like at Cosmonic, we build Cosmonic on top of wasmCloud. What we need is very different than someone else who's running it, to run like a bunch of like their microservices that they're starting to roll out. Like those policies can be very different. And so like we're trying to keep it as flexible as possible for people so that you don't have to, like, you can tie it into whatever, like you might already have a service that does this kind of thing for you. And so you can tie it into and any number of services that are out there, OPA, anything. And so, yeah, and like Kevin basically put it in chat, like it's up to platform builders and available at runtime rather than having it be like something we make the decision on as the maintainers of wasmCloud.
It's a pretty interesting like dynamic that, like, in some sense there's no space between a static thing that is in your control versus a programming language that has to be called over the network to make choices. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our goal for the policy service as it stands today is to prove out a use case. The policy service, we wanted to have an answer to people who are saying, well, I'm administering a wasmCloud lattice, I'm running it in my system. how do I make sure that if my control interface connection gets compromised, that somebody can't take arbitrary actors and providers and start them on my wasmCloud hosts? And really the answer to that is something like this policy service, where you can say, in my lattice, for sure, all the time, make sure that it's only resources that I have signed and allowed in the lattice. So we're trying to actively prove out that use case in a generic way. And as we go through it, it may end up that 95% of the time when people are interacting with this policy service, that they're using some implementation that uses Open Policy Agent or something like that. In fact, this is essentially the way that RPC happened with wasmCloud. We went through a couple of months, maybe years, proving out, there's inter-process calls and there's NATS, RPC. We just found out that we're using NATS all the time, and that making that technology choice, while it removes a little bit of the abstraction, it just makes everything better. So if you try out the policy service and you take a look at it and you find the abstraction a little frustrating or doesn't quite feel right, it's because we're actively trying to figure out the right way to commit to something like that. And keeping it generic allows us to have the flexibility to actually try that out. Well, cool. Great questions, everyone. I really enjoyed this kind of free time at the end of the call. I think we got a lot done and a lot talked about. This is right at the end, though. Actually, Taylor just dropped off too. So I'll let everybody get back to their busy days. And thanks for coming by, asking great questions.